As a certified executive coach and certified professional in learning and performance, Andrea's mission is to help others discover their full potential. Please join me in welcoming Andrea.
Thank you so much. Good morning to you all. It's so good to be here. So you have a set of handouts in front of you, similar to Jonathan. We're going to be using those. You know, and you most definitely don't want to hear me talk about leadership for the next 60 minutes. I really want to engage you in this conversation and have some interaction. So we know that the theme of today is leadership, share your vision. And so I'm interested in what leadership means to each of you. You know, you could Google leadership and get over 700 million hits. There are all kinds of books, all kinds of blogs, all kinds of articles. Everyone's got a perspective. But I'm most interested in what does it mean to you? So what I'd like for you to do is just stand up. Go ahead and stand up. You've been sitting for a while anyway, so this will feel good. And with somebody at your table or somebody at a neighboring table, I'd like for you to just take 30 seconds and share with him or her, what does leadership mean to you? Go for it. All right, let's go ahead and take a seat. Good. So not surprising, I heard some similar things across the room. When a drop of water hits a still pond, what happens? It ripples out. And can't you all see that ripple in your mind's eye? So the thing that we all have in common in the room is that we are all leaders. Leadership is not about a title or a position. Leadership is influence. And so every day, you're influencing all of the people that you interact with, whether you realize it or not. And just like that drop of water, you are creating ripples. The thing I want you to think about over the next hour is, what kinds of ripples are you creating? Do you even know? Do you know what your influence is? You know, all of you are leaving a legacy based on the choices and the actions and the things you do every day. You know, I mentioned that there are lots of articles, there are lots of books, there are a lot of leader development programs. You know, one of my favorite authors of leadership development is Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. How many of you are familiar with that program? I'm a certified Franklin Covey facilitator, so I particularly love his content. Stephen Covey died just a couple of years ago, and right before he died, he was asked to write an introduction to a leadership book. And he shared his definition of leadership. He'd never done that before, and I love his definition of leadership. Leadership is communicating to people their worth and potential so clearly that they're inspired to see it in themselves. Isn't that great? It's communicating the worth and potential of people so clearly that they're inspired to see it themselves. So again, those ripples that you're creating, you know, the people that you're influencing and interacting, what would they say about you? Are you communicating their worth and their potential? Do you even know what that is? So that's our focus today. That's what we're going to talk about, the way in which you're influencing. So a couple questions for you to get a sense of who all is in the room. How many of you, by show of hands, are currently leading other people in some capacity? Put your hands up high so I can see. Great. How many of you are preparing for leadership in some capacity in the future? Okay, good. So a few more hands. Okay, so I think pretty much everyone's hand went up, right? So all of you are learners today, and the best leaders are the best learners, because there's always something new to take on. And I know this is a day for professional development for you, so you're in the right place. A lot of great topics. So here's another question I have for you. For those of you that raised your hands on the first question, you're leading people, right? There's a group of people that you're influencing or directing. Here's a question I have for you. How many of you were given training to prepare you to step into those roles? If you were given training to step into that role, I'd like you to stand up. Okay, did you notice that there are a lot fewer people standing up than the hands that went up earlier? Great, thank you. Give them a round of applause for that. You know, what we saw is not unlike what we see every day. This scenario is playing out every day in organizations where individual contributors, because they're really good individual contributors, what happens? They get promoted to manager. And unfortunately, they're not given the training support. Look at this stat. This comes from the Ken Blanchard group. Ken Blanchard says that 61% of all new managers are not given any training. 66% no mentoring, and 69% no coaching. So we saw something similar play out in this room just a minute ago. That I don't like that. So my background, the last 20 years I have been a student of leadership. I have naturally gravitated to this work. My undergraduate degree is in psychology. I have a master's degree in human resource development. I've always been interested in why do people do what they do. So I naturally gravitated towards human resources when I entered the business world, and from there really evolved into a focus on executive coaching and leadership development, given the impact that leaders have. And so because I'm a student of leadership and I love this work, these statistics, I don't get these statistics. And I feel a mission and responsible for equipping leaders and helping them to be successful. I can also personally relate to this, like many of you can. You know, when I was in my first role in an organization called Premier Farnell, I was a human resources generalist for this global electronics distribution company. And I loved it, and I was doing really good, and I was really connecting with business leaders from across the company. And so my boss came to me and he said, Andrea, because you're doing so well, we'd like for you to lead the team. And so I called my mom, and I was so excited. I got a promotion. I'm a manager now. And everyone told me, good luck. You've got this. You know, you've done such a good job. No doubt you'll be successful in your new role. But the skills that I had as an individual contributor, the technical skills, were very different than the skills I needed to be an effective manager. And so I kind of looked like this into my new role. How many of you can relate to that? Yes, like what does success look like in this new role? You know, it's a lot of the things that Jonathan just talked about. I didn't have clear expectations. I wasn't clear on what success looked like in the role. You know, all of a sudden these people who had been my peers were now direct reports, and so those relationships looked and felt very, very different. So I want to go back just real quickly and align to what it is I want to do over the next 60 minutes. To really maximize our time, I'm going to start with some statistics. I've already given you some stats, but I want to share just a few more to reinforce this importance of equipping leaders to be successful. Not only yourselves, but you guys work in a really important industry. I believe the seed industry is, if not the, is one of the most important industries. Right? It's a growing industry and growing in importance. So you have a huge opportunity to be a part of that growth and that evolution by developing the leaders within your businesses. Because that transition from individual contributor, as we've just talked about, is a tough one. And so you have an opportunity to lean into folks to help them with that. So I want to make the business case for why that's so important, and then we'll go to what are some simple ways that we can do that. So I'm going to share just 3 keys for helping folks to lead from individual contributor to manager. Does that make sense? Any questions about that? Also, feel free throughout this to jump in with any questions or insights that you have. I believe we're all in this together. I certainly don't have all the answers, but you can no doubt, you can tell how passionate I am about this topic and how energized I am about this topic, and I'd love to invite you to be a part of that conversation. Okay, so we've talked about our goals. We've talked about this importance of setting people up for success. I want to share just a quick story with you. Does this image look familiar to anybody? Anybody know what this is? This is the Costa Concordia. You may remember in 2012, this was a cruise ship that held 4,000 passengers, and it hit some land and sank off the coast of Italy. You remember that story? Do you remember the story of the captain? The captain was villainized through that process. And he wasn't a good captain. There were stories about him flirting with his girlfriend on the bridge, and when the ship sank, he was one of the first off into a lifeboat. When he got on land, he ran and hid. And so all the stories coming out, and I remember hearing about that, and given the work that I do and some of the stats I've just shared with you, I wondered, because the stories were all about how bad of a captain he was. But my question I kept asking was, who made him captain? What was the evaluation process, and why was he allowed to give orders and have the safety and the security of 4,000 people in his hands? What percentage of new managers do you think fail in their first 2 years? Any guesses? There's a research paper, a recent research paper by the CEB group shares this great stat. What percent of new managers fail or underperform in their first 2 years? Any guesses? What do you think? Just shout it out. 75? 50? Any other guesses? It's kind of right in between there. 60% of new managers fail in their first 2 years. And the other note that I've made there is not only that, but because we know that 60% of leaders are not set up for success on average, think about the poor habits that are being developed. The captain of that cruise ship is just one of many, many, many. No doubt you guys have worked with, or maybe are working with, leaders that don't demonstrate the good leadership behaviors that we're talking about today. But who supported them? What mentoring or coaching or support did they have? If we look at the research, they may not have had much support. So this next visual is a reminder then of why it's so important that we respect the transition from individual contributor to manager. I love this visual. Can't you just all relate to that? Isn't that just the visual of life? We start out with a plan. We think that's what success looks like, and it's never a straight, easy path, is it? But particularly when leaders are put into new roles, they're having to navigate new pitfalls and new challenges and new opportunities. So again, this reinforces why it's so important to help leaders with that transition, because they're new things, they're new challenges. And so they'll only be successful and only be equipped to support those challenges if they have support, mentoring, training, coaching. All right, so what I want to do now that I've shared some stats that reinforce leaders are not supported, 60%, 6 of 10 leaders will fail in their first 2 years, fail or underperform. I want to talk now, I want to share a couple stats on the manager's impact. So we all know that managers have big influence. How many of you have heard the quote, employees don't leave companies, they leave managers? You've probably heard that? Yeah, several hands go up. It's because of that connection. It's because who's in the best position to shape an employee? Who's in the best position to help them create a great experience? Of course, the manager. So what percentage of employee engagement would you attribute to the manager? Just throw out some stats. What percentage of employee engagement would you attribute to the manager? Any ideas? 80%, so he went high, good. Any other guesses? 60%? You guys are good at bookending these because it's right in the middle. Gallup says 70% of employee engagement can be attributed to the manager. So we know from research and our experience that the manager plays a big role. Yeah, sir?
Could you define what you mean by employee engagement?
Yeah, so it's how connected, how committed an employee is to his or her work. Great question. So 70% of the variance of employee engagement can be attributed to the manager. All right, and so good question in the back, and we know employee engagement is about how committed an individual is to his or her work. So what does employee engagement look like right now across the country? 13% of employees worldwide are engaged. And you can see that it's costing organizations a lot of money. So what does that tell you? If 70% of employee engagement can be attributed to the manager, but only 13% of employees worldwide are engaged, yeah, you with me? We have an opportunity, don't we? How effective are managers? We've also seen the research that says managers aren't set up for success and that 60% of them are failing. So this is why I'm so passionate about this leadership development work, is because we have an opportunity to lean into leaders and to help them be successful. Because research shows us that overall there's a big opportunity there. I believe that we all work for organizations, and organizations have goals, organizations have missions, organizations have financial results that they're expecting to achieve. And so I do believe that as leaders, our number one responsibility is to help drive the results of the organizations that we serve. That's why we exist. How we do that is through the engagement of people. This visual, I created this a few years ago, and I use this a lot because as an HR leader, as a leader myself in my organization, this helps me to keep the focus on what I can control. Because I can't control the result, but what can I control? How I treat people. Happy, engaged employees drive happy, engaged customers, driving what? Results, profit, growth, health of an organization. And so as leaders, where do we put our focus? On helping employees to be engaged, on helping employees to be happy. The happiest employees are the most productive, are the best employees. Thoughts, questions about that? All right, so that's the business case. We've looked at research that shows leaders aren't set up for success. We've got research that shows leaders are underperforming, 6 of 10. We've got research that shows managers have a big impact on engagement, but employees worldwide are not engaged, so that's telling. And then we've got a good visual that reminds us as leaders of our impact on helping to drive the organization's success by leaning into people. So what I see then happening across organizations every day is them saying, yes, we need to provide leader development, but it's so complicated. This quote reminds me of how important it is to just keep things simple. I've worked with, hundreds of organizations over the last few years to help them put leader development processes into place. And so often, one organization in particular came to me and said, we have 78 competencies. Would you help us develop these across our business? Well, 78 competencies, it's a little overcomplicated. Let's simplify what success is. And so over the last few years and research that we've done, a lot of the stats that I shared with you, we've pulled together just a very simple model to keep it simple for leaders who are transitioning from individual contributor to manager. So these are the 3 keys, and we're going to spend quite a bit of time over the next few minutes on this first one because it's the most important. And Jonathan said this in his presentation, that any relationship that you're trying to build, who does it start with? It starts with you, right? It starts with looking in the mirror. So this is not a new concept. But in order to successfully know and grow a group of people, you got to know yourself. You got to know your style so that you can adapt. You also have to get clear on what do you think about and how do you think about things? On average, anybody know how many thoughts we have go through our heads on a daily basis? Any guesses? Throw out a guess. A lot more than that. He said 2,500. A lot more than 10,000. Not that many. But good guess. Between 60 and 70,000 thoughts a day. That's a lot of thoughts. That's a little bit freeing, isn't it? Because I'm like, okay, yeah, that's all that stuff going on up there all the time. But what you think about comes about. What you think about, your mindset, drives what you do, giving the results you want, the results that you're getting. So it's so important, and good, I see lots of heads nodding at that concept, so you get that. If you're not getting the results you want, go back to your thoughts. How are you talking about it? How are you thinking about it? I have an executive coaching client right now. I'm a president of an organization, and when he first came to me, he spent the whole hour complaining, and his team sucks, and that sucks, and the industry, and blah, blah, blah. And so I listened to him and affirmed, and then I said at the end, like, absolutely. Like, you are getting all of that because that's what you believe. Like, you just spent an entire hour talking about how awful it is, so I'm not surprised that it's so awful. If you want to create a different reality, like, let's shape a different experience. Let's create some different thoughts. So that's this idea of mindset. Again, that could be a whole day topic, but I want to delve into that in just a little bit. So that's where it starts. Once you're good on who you are, then you're in a position to know your team and grow your team. So know yourself, know your strengths, know your preferences, know your motivators, and own it. That's what we're going to work on now. And we're going to start by doing a simple assessment. So I want you to pull out your handouts. You'll see on page 2, a 10-question simple assessment. This is going to give you some insight on you, since our first points around developing a leadership mindset is knowing yourself. We're going to do a simple DISC assessment. Now, this is a simple DISC assessment. I have done full week DISC workshops. I do a lot of full day DISC workshops. We are doing a 10-minute DISC workshop. So what I've done is I've taken the broad comprehensive assessment and I've modified it in just 10 questions. You know, it typically takes about 15 minutes online to complete, and the outcome is a 25-page report with tons of insights. But this is a great introduction for you today. And if you're interested, then I've got some great resources that I can connect you to do the full assessment. What you see on the page is just 10 questions, 4 items for each question. What I'd like for you to do is just read each of those items and select the one that best represents you. Now, you might say, Andrea, there are 2 or 3 that represent me. Yeah, absolutely. That's going to be the case for a lot of folks. Choose the one that best represents you most of the time. Put a check mark there. After you've done that for all 10 items, I'd like for you to go back and reconcile what you checked with the bottom of the page. There's an answer key at the bottom left-hand corner of the page. You see that there? And you'll see, like, let's use item 1 as an example. You see, for item 1, if you checked the 4th box, you would circle the I. Got that? So you'll do that for each item, and then count the number of D's, I's, S's, and C's that you circled, giving you a number for each of those, and then we'll talk about what that means. So I'm going to give you, like, just a couple of minutes. Shouldn't take you much longer than that. Have fun.